Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Raven's Readings. Today I'll be reading something different. This episode is sponsored by me and my first novel, Kirk's Landing. I wrote this a number of years ago, drawing on my own knowledge of gangs, police work, graffiti, First Nations, and life in a small northern town, with some fantasy added in via evil spirits and a magical power. I was pleased to learn I could actually write, and not badly either. I hope you agree. I'll be reading from the first few chapters with the hope that I encourage you to buy your very own copy. It's available online from various sites as a paperback and an ebook. See my own site, mikeyoung.ca, for more information. Check out your local bookstore too. Mine is called Spaniel's Tale. And my book is in major libraries across Canada, as is Return to Kirk's Landing. Also, if you need help with your own writing or publishing, well, drop me a line. I'll be glad to help. Enjoy my reading today and leave a comment. Do you like this mixed genre? Are you from a small town? Chapter 1. Dave slouched in his chair, surrounded by tattoos and testosterone. Only full-patch members were left in the room. All the rest had been sent out. All except Dave, as once again he deliberately faded from their notice. He didn't know exactly how he disappeared, whether people's eyes just slid away from him or if light actually bent around him. His grandmother had never told him. All he knew was that it took a lot of concentration and he couldn't fool cameras. "Last call for beer," said Weasel. Dave quietly sipped his water. He was tired and needed to stay alert to focus his magical power, as today's meeting was a key one. The gang would be discussing how they could expand their drug network, targeting new markets beyond the big cities. Dave tipped his chair back, scratched his full beard, and then, despite his good intentions, his thoughts wandered. He reviewed in his mind the number and location of firearms in their room, and he then considered the number of members there with known or alleged murders on their scorecard. He joined up only a few weeks ago with a referral from another chapter, but already it looked like his work would pay off well. Sasquatch, their very large and very hairy leader, finally called them to order. "Okay, let's get going. Weasel, Spider, good job last week torching up that club. Now they'll show us a little more respect and cash. Oh, and a welcome to our newest member, Badger." Sasquatch had taken back control last year when he'd been released from prison with an MBA earned on taxpayers' dollars. Badger was even newer than Dave, recently arrived from some First Nations group out in California. He had already been made part of the inner circle based on an impressive criminal record. They'd met earlier, and he'd given Dave a peculiar look at the time. "Spider, phone's off and no photos," said Sasquatch. "Oh, sorry, boss." Spider put down his cell phone. "I just thought you'd want to see us all together." He stared at the picture, and then pointed across the table at Dave. "Hey, what's he still doing here?" Dave woke up with a jolt, crashing back onto the floor and definitely losing his concentration. With his sudden unfade, everyone stared, frozen for a moment. He knew that every person present would kill him without hesitation. He was on his own in this. He stood up, spread his hands, smiling around the room. "Hey, guys, lighten up. I just dozed off in my chair. What's the big deal?" This was not going to work, judging from the angry looks he was getting, especially from the new guy. Badger gestured angrily at him, and Dave swayed with a wave of dizziness. His pause gave Sasquatch long enough to block the only door. Dave glanced behind him at the large window, almost floor to ceiling, with rows of painted-over panes. He grabbed a chair, swung as if to go after Badger, but then turned and hit the window as hard as he could, shattering the old wood trim and glass. Good thing he had practiced this in simulation exercises. Now was the time to see if his leather jacket was worth the price. He covered his face with an arm and pushed through the frame, landing on a pile of garbage bags behind the sushi restaurant. He scrambled to his feet, reeking of fish, and raced down the alley, slipping in the January slush. Angry shouts filled the air as the rest of the gang piled through after him. No gunshots, yet. He burst out onto Queen Street, risking a quick glance over his shoulder to confirm they were still close behind him. He turned back just in time to see the side of a big red TTC streetcar. Dave slammed into the side of the red rocket and fell back to the pavement. There was a screech of tires and a car bumper appeared inches from his nose. A Toronto police bumper. Within seconds, an anxious officer was looking down at him. "Whoa, slow down, buddy. You all right there?" As Dave's vision cleared, he looked up at the concerned cop, then back at the alley. Most of his pursuers had stopped at the entrance, but Badger and Sasquatch walked toward him, calm as could be. "That's okay, officer," says Sasquatch. Our buddy wasn't paying attention. Our apologies. We'll take him across the street to the local clinic and take good care of him." Dave looked at them, then up at the cop, still bending down with a concerned look. Choices, always choices. "Up yours, pig," he snarled and swung a fist at the innocently smiling face. Chapter 2. Dave's nose had finally stopped bleeding. His ribs still ached, though, less from the collision with the streetcar than from the knee of the cop who'd held him face down on the pavement. Once they'd taken the cuffs off, Dave had cleaned up a bit, but the smell of well-aged sushi still clung to him. There was a rattle in the lock, and then a guard smiled down at him. "Come on, pretty boy, some suit wants to talk to you. Try not to bleed all over him." Dave slouched in his chair, silent, staring at the RCMP inspector across from him. Dave noticed him glance up at the camera, a reminder of how this would have to go down. The inspector leaned forward, seemingly calm, but Dave knew him well enough to know he was upset. Chuck Williams was in fact very upset. What a mess. Not just Dave, the whole situation. With Dave's scuffed jacket, torn jeans, long hair, and beard, he looked like street trash, and he smelled of fish. Broad-shouldered, tall and muscular in a wiry way, he also had that haunted, unhealthy bad boy look around his eyes that made people believe his story of an adolescent spent indulging in drugs. And those tattoos were just icing on the cake. Dave was more than just Chuck's best undercover worker, though. He really liked the kid. He'd been worried sick about him and this harebrained infiltration plan, so far off the risk grid it would never have been approved without Chuck's signature. He shook his head. Punching the uniform officer was typical Dave. Brilliant, he had a way out of the box. Maybe there was still a chance to salvage the case. But first things first. Get Dave out of here. Chuck leaned forward. "So, Bear, I guess you figured moving to Toronto we wouldn't find you. You underestimate the RCMP. I have a federal warrant being forwarded to the Toronto Police as we speak, and I'm here to escort you to Chicoutimi personally. Don't plan on doing anything creative for the next 5 years." He was glad to pull Dave out of the reach of the nomads, but he was even more relieved to find a way to get Dave out of undercover before he got too careless. It was about time Dave grew up and thought about rounding out some skills for the rest of his career. Dave smiled back. He liked his new alias, Bear. It fit well. He'd picked up on the hint, too, that neither of them knew how secure the Toronto Police cell block was. Bikers had associates everywhere. "You got nothing on me," he said. "Those guys just started chasing me. I never saw them before. Chased me right into a streetcar. I was so groggy then, I thought the cop was coming after me, so I hit back, just in self-defense." He folded his arms and put a foot up on the table. "It's all a misunderstanding." The inspector shoved Dave's foot back off the table. "Nice try. But I've heard all your stories before. You're done for. Whatever you were trying to set up here is finished." Dave argued back for a few minutes more, but eventually went along with the move to get him out of Toronto. Later, after Dave had been paraded publicly in handcuffs to the waiting RCMP vehicle, they had a chance to talk more freely. "Well, Corporal Brown," said the inspector, "here's another fine mess you've gotten us into. Did you at least get any details on the new plans?" "Sorry, Inspector," said Dave. "Didn't get much, other than the names of key players close to Sasquatch. The meeting was just started when I got busted." "They're really pissed off, Dave. Too bad they made you. I hope you're not losing your touch. I'm afraid that's it for you around here. It's only been a few hours, and the word is already out on the street about you. They still seem to buy your cover story, so are now trying to find out which rival gang you worked for. At any rate, while you do great work, even if somewhat unorthodox, you're no longer any good to me on the streets here. So what do we do with you? Any ideas? How about the SWAT team up in Ottawa? Dave shook his head. He'd heard about them, a former friend. Lots of simulations, nice toys, no real action. Plus, compared to Toronto, Ottawa was boring. He'd been there once. Once was enough. No, SWAT's not my thing, Chuck. Oh, you're right. You'd probably blow something up. All right. Then here's another choice, a better one for your career. I can set something up for you working uniform in another province. There's an opening in Manitoba in a little town next to a reserve and provincial park. You'll be the commander there in a small detachment far off the beaten track. It's an easy posting. Just think of it as some time off. You could do with a break. Plus, you'll have a chance to finally develop some supervisory skills. The main industry there is a big new eco-friendly mill, a showpiece for the government. The town is quiet until the summer tourists roll in, so it should be easy for you to get used to running a detachment. Can I think about it? Said Dave. Not really, said Chuck. You need to get off the streets right away. You've time to just pack a bag and leave. We'll send your things up after you. Do a good job, keep things running smoothly. I'll make sure you get a good chance of promotion, wherever you decide to go. Just no more undercover. Hey, wait a minute, Chuck. Undercover's my thing. You know I'm good at it. I'm top of my game here. I'm the best you have. I'm a quarter First Nations, so I can do Native, Mexican, South American, whatever's needed. Chuck was just shaking his head. Oh, come on, buddy, said Dave. You owe me. At least give me drug squad somewhere. Patrol work is for the B team. It's house league, especially in some rinky-dink place in Manitoba. Dave liked being a loner and liked the advantage his secret power gave him. He couldn't just give that all up. He could see that Chuck still had on his stubborn face, though. Chuck, who had your back in that argument with the chief? Who got you the information about who was padding their overtime claims? So yes, I admit I'd better disappear from Toronto, but keep me in the file. I'll do 6 months. That should be plenty. Chuck held up a hand. Dave, once you get going, you could talk the stripes off a zebra. We both know that getting you out of Toronto is not only the best thing for your health, but it's SOP. Fine. I'll keep you on file. I'll give you that. But you'll do a year. Pick up some people skills, maybe even learn something about Aboriginal issues while you're there, and just manage your team. Learn how to wear a uniform again and impress the district commander. Don't make any waves. No problem, said Dave. I guarantee it will be a quiet year. Chapter 3. Dave woke up with a jerk, confused, falling. The call of a loon echoed in his head. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now started our descent into Kirk's Landing. Please ensure your seat belts are securely fastened. He tuned out the rest of the announcement, stretched, and ran his fingers through his short, dark hair. He had a crick in his neck, a sore butt, the start of a headache, and was dying for a smoke. These 20-passenger planes might be great for smaller airports, but they were built like a little tube, cramped for someone his size. He glanced at his neighbor. I guess I fell asleep. You sure did. You were tucked up against the window for most of the flight. Hi, I'm John. Are you getting off here too? Dave nodded. Not for long, though. He crouched down and peered out the tiny window of the Bearskin Airlines turboprop. The view hadn't changed much for the last hour. Snow, scruffy pines, ice-covered lakes, and more snow, still a blinding white in the late afternoon sun. He supposed this was a great idea for tourists, but for him it would just be very cold and very isolated. His boss Chuck had been his usual efficient self. Within a day, he'd orchestrated a cover story for Dave's disappearance from Toronto and the Chicoutimi prison, and persuaded Toronto police that charges could be dropped because Dave was too groggy from being hit by the police car to form intent, arranged transfer documents, convinced the local RCMP to post him to the Kirk's Landing attachment as the corporal in charge, ordered up some winter-weight clothing to be delivered to the detachment, and emailed briefing notes to be read on the plane. Well, the notes hadn't been encouraging. Just another sleepy small town with money from the mill and tourists, and probably nothing more exciting than a speeding ticket. He reminded himself that sleepy and boring would be good while he was up there. Definitely a change from the hustle of Toronto life, but bearable, he supposed. was too late to change his decision anyway, so the best he could hope for would be to get Chuck to reconsider in 6 months. He would miss his independence, though, and the excitement of undercover work. The plane rolled to a stop just short of a small terminal building, and a ramp was wheeled up. Judging from the cold draft that swept in the open door, it would be a brisk walk to the terminal. Dave stood up, swayed with a bit of dizziness, but managed to help his seatmate wrestle down a bulky package covered in a layer of packing tape. Dave was tall to start off with, but as he wrapped his new down coat around him, he started to take up most of the aisle. "Well, thanks for the help," said John. "And I was down south on business. I'm in engineering here at the mill, and I decided I might as well bring a new supply of coffee back." He patted Dave's shoulder. "That's a serious parka there. You look like a big bear in it." "Better be careful in hunting season. You look a little over-prepared with it, though. You must be from down south." "I've been around," said Dave. "Oh, those southern winters are all slush and rain," said John. "Up here, we expect it to be like this every year, so we dress for it. But it's not that bad out today, really, for mid-January. Maybe 20 below with the nice hot sun. It should really drop tonight, though, with this clear sky. Maybe minus 40 if we're lucky." Dave shivered a bit. "I'm not sure if I'd call that lucky." There were only a few others getting off with him, but all wore lighter coats, with a toque here and there. He ducked his head as he stepped out onto the stairs. The cold and brightness made him pause for a second at the top step. Winters at Depot and Regina had been brisk at times, but never quite like this. His nose tingled, his eyes watered, and there was a definite draft up his pant leg. One of his first priorities would be to dig out his long johns. The snow crunched under Dave's feet as he walked toward the small metal terminal building. Aside from a control tower, some small planes under tarps, and a couple of storage sheds, and a small hangar, that was it for the Kirk's Landing Airport. All was quiet as he approached the terminal entrance, a big change from the noise and hustle of Pearson and Toronto. The air was almost painfully crisp, clear and clean, the colors bright in the sun. Next to the wall was a flock of small birds, busily fluttering and chattering around a scattering of donuts. Above them, on the edge of the roof, sat a larger black and white bird, looking like a chickadee on steroids. It cocked its head at him and whistled and flew off. "Hello to you, too," Dave muttered. As he opened the door, he noticed a small sign in the window saying, "Welcome to our hellhole." John was still behind him, struggling with his big parcel. "We got that label last year from a rather outspoken cabinet minister. Her plane has stopped off just to wait out a storm. Well, she got bored and went into our little town, and I guess just assumed we would all reschedule just to suit her. When she saw the plane almost ready to leave her behind, she threw a bit of a temper tantrum and started yelling at everyone. Didn't bother her as much. We've been called worse things by better people." Dave held the door open for him. "And? Thanks. Ironically, she's now looking after Northern Economic Development. She gets to inflict herself on all sorts of charming little hamlets. In fact, I think she's due back here in a few months." The terminal was small but fairly new-looking, with windows along the front, rows of plain plastic seats, and some sad-looking potted plants. At one end sat the obligatory coffee shop and a small store with chips and drinks, magazine racks, and rows of postcards, and a few shelves of bedraggled souvenirs. Dave doubted if there was an executive lounge for government officials to wait for their flight. "John, back from the Big South?" Dave turned as a very young-looking constable approached them. "Oh, hi. Corporal Brown? I'm Constable Leaf, Jim Reese. I was hoping I'd be the first to welcome you to your new detachment, but John here beat me to it." Dave smiled and shook Reese's hand. John suddenly looked nervous, very nervous. He got a little pale, and Dave could already see a few beads of sweat on his forehead. "Yeah, I met him on the plane," said Dave. "He's brought a fresh supply of coffee with him, too." "Really? I thought you were a tea drinker, John," said Reese. Dave carefully turned toward his seatmate, stumbled a bit, and managed to not only knock the big parcel to the floor, but fall on it with one knee. "Oh, sorry, John." Dave smiled to himself as the bag split open, revealing several smaller bags of coffee and 2 clear baggies of brown-green leaves, maybe a few ounces worth. "Is that some of your tea, John?" He looked over at Reese and then pointedly back at the evidence. "Oh, wait a minute, Mr. Hamill," said Reese. "What do we have here?" Reese took John by the elbow and led him aside. "Why don't you have a seat over here for a second?" He turned back to Dave. "Want me to call Norris to come and get you while I deal with this?" "Oh, don't worry about it," said Dave. "We don't even know for sure what we have here, although I doubt that it's orange pico. You probably don't want to be going through a suitcase in this tiny airport lounge anyway. How about we take John and his things back to the detachment, where you can find out his story and see exactly what this is. I'll have a cup of coffee there and a smoke and lock my gun away, and we'll talk about what you're going to do next. You do have several options, you know." "A good plan," said Reese. He smiled and turned back to John. "Mr. Hamill, how were you getting home from the airport?" John was close to blubbering. "I was taking a taxi, I guess." "I'll save you the cost," said Reese, "and give you a ride to the detachment office. We can have a chat when we get there." Dave reckoned Reese back over. If he coughs up good intelligence, you can always cut a deal with the charge, since falling on a package is not a customary search technique. "Sounds good," said Reese, "although I suspect John doesn't have any drug links. I'll confirm what's in these baggies, and then I can talk with him. Thanks for the tips." "No problem," said Dave. He lowered his voice again. "And I'd appreciate if we kept quiet about my undercover work in Toronto. I just got burned there by the nomads and don't want them tracking me here." "Well, it's hard to keep anything quiet in little towns," said Reese, "but I'll do my best." He straightened up in his role as briefing constable. "We've no biker gangs up here, though. Not any gangs at all, really. Apparently there are drugs in town, mostly weed, bit of cocaine in the summer, but nothing really organized. Just a quiet little place." Dave nodded. Reese continued, "A nice place, though. I just graduated 8 months ago, so this is my first posting. I know I look young for my age, but I'm 20. Dave smiled. "We all have to start somewhere." He'd hoped just to hide up here and do as little work as possible. It looked like he'd have to watch out for Constable Doogie Howser. At least Reese's 6 months coaching stint was over, so Jim could now assume full duties on his own. "Want a coffee?" said Reese. "No, thanks," he replied. "Not really a fan of weak airport coffee." Reese grinned. "You'll need to check out Rosie's then. He brews a mean cup. None of that big city, grande, triple double shot fluffy soy foam type stuff." Dave listened with half an ear as Reese carried on with his chirpy introduction to the area. His briefing notes had already covered the basics for him. There are about 800 people in the town, a small pulp and paper mill, some hunting and fishing, and about 300 natives on the nearby reserve. He hoped there would be no issues with them. He couldn't remember which First Nations it was. Maybe Ojibwa? The town and reserve were both just inside the edge of Whiteshell Provincial Park. His detachment had 2 constables and a part-time clerk. Not a lot for the area, but maybe that meant it was quiet. "The other constable, Norris, was your field coach?" asked Dave. Yes," said Reese. "She's been to a few detachments already. She's a big help, but it's been pretty easy so far. It's great. I've wanted to do this since I was a kid." "And the clerk?" said Dave. "She's the mayor's wife," said Jim. "She seems mainly to be there so that she can keep him in the loop with what we're doing and pass on what council thinks is important." Great, thought Dave, a micromanaging council to deal with. Might be more work to this than he thought, even to just keep a low profile for his sentence. Dave managed to pop outside for a quick cigarette while they waited for his bags to make the short but slow journey from plane to terminal. He calmed his nerves a bit, but didn't ease his headache. When he went back in, John was sitting quietly, staring at the floor, the only passenger left in the terminal. Dave's bags finally showed up, including his pistol. "Let's go, Mr. Hamill," he said. Dave picked up his bags, and Reese picked up John's, and they headed for the parking lot. "I'm over here," said Reese, pointing to a brand-new-looking SUV. "Mr. Hamill, in here, please." John seemed in a daze as Dave helped him into the back seat. Dave climbed in front with Reese and looked back through the plastic partition. "Sure looks like a first-timer to me, Reese. Hey, nice truck." "Just got it," said Reese. "These roads just killed the last one. We've 2 vehicles for the 3 of us, said Reese, but Norris says with the summer rush we could even do with a third one. We look after the town, help the band police, patrol a section of the main highway, and also work with conservation agents in the park. Oh, and we have a boat to tow around in the summer and a skidoo trailer in the winter. Well, at least we don't have to patrol any ice roads. That's good, said Dave. I wouldn't want to risk this nice shiny truck or me. Just hope I can keep it shiny, said Reese as he pulled onto the road in a spray of gravel. Chapter 4. Reese reached for the radio mic. Just a sec, Dave. 23 Alpha 2 to dispatch, checking in. 10-4, hi Reese, Sharon here. Scratched up that new truck yet? Reese looked embarrassed. I have the new NCO in the car with me, Corporal Dave Brown. We just got off the plane and he's already on patrol. Hi, Corporal Brown. She had a warm, motherly voice. Welcome to Manitoba and to Kirk's Landing. Come in and visit us sometime in Winnipeg and we'll give you a tour of Division HQ. Reese explained to him that the radio and dispatch service was mostly done out of Winnipeg, although staff at the local detachment could patch in as well. In the evenings, the dispatchers always wanted to know who was in the car and what shift they were working. They even time me while I'm out of the car on break. Dave smiled. He suspected this was a safety thing more than a coffee break monitoring. He would definitely try and visit them, though, as it was always good to put a face to a voice. Dispatchers were essential to operations. It was always wise to be in their good books. He stared out the window as they drove along the twisted gravel road between high snowbanks and thick, dark stands of trees. The snow was turning blue in the fading light, and the shadows seemed to shift and move between the trees as he watched. Not nearly as comforting as the familiar darkness of the back alleys of Toronto. He'd enjoyed his work there, working independently, using his fade to carefully infiltrate groups, and as a shy little kid, he learned to just not be noticed as a useful way to avoid a teacher's question or a bully's fist. Then one summer, his grandmother had inadvertently turned that skill into a real power, the ability to literally disappear. His dad had been posted off somewhere again, but instead of the usual summer camps, Dave had been sent to stay with his mother's side of the family. Nana had taken him fishing and taught him how to be quiet, to blend in until the fish didn't see him. To her surprise, neither did any people. He just faded from notice. She was impressed with how strong the power was in him, but warned him to be careful and to keep it a secret. So far, all anybody knew was that he had an unusual ability to blend in, an ability that had gained him an early shot in his career at undercover work in Burnaby. Now he's part of the Elite Combined Forces Special Enforcement Unit, a dream job. Unfortunately, that job was on hold now, as here he was, a marked man, hiding out in Kirk's Landing for a year. Not far, said Reese. We're lucky there's a long gravel esker here. It makes a natural runway, so we ended up on most of the airline's routes as a stop on the way to Winnipeg. Great for tourist traffic. Dave grunted as he watched the already boring scenery. Sure are a lot of trees up here. Mostly spruce, said Reese, and in between are some poplar and aspen, a few leaves still hanging on. In a couple of months, spring breakup will start. Come April, everything seems to explode into green at once. Reese paused as they came to a paved road, glanced for traffic, and turned left. This is Route 44. The town's a few miles further on. Eventually, this will get you to Winnipeg. Not the most direct route, mind you, but it's through some beautiful country. Bikers love to tour through it. My home in Kenora is like this, too. Me and my buddies pretty well lived in the bush. Well, whenever we wanted to skip school, we never went to the mall. We just walked out of town. I was surprised that I got this area as my first posting. I love it. He glanced over at Dave. Where did you want to go first? Right to the detachment office? Dave glanced at the back seat. John was actually dozing off. He must have had an exhausting visit in Toronto. Most people don't fall asleep when they get arrested. A quick tour of the town would help, said Dave. I can't see that taking very long. And then we can drop off John, and after he's been processed, head on to the hotel. I booked a room there for a few days until my stuff arrives from Toronto. That would be the Grand, said Reese, our one and only hotel, right on the shores of Raven Lake. It's a beautiful old place. You can also get a room up at the motel by the turnoff, but I wouldn't recommend it. Not that nice, really. It's mostly used when summer campers get tired of sleeping on the ground. The Grand is a great pub, too, the Raymond's Roost. JB runs that, along with a hotel. Jacqueline Bourbeau, but we all call her JB. A local girl, maybe in her late 20s, nice person. Used to be her dad's place, but she took over when he disappeared last year. Disappeared? Yeah, said Reese. He was up here doing some research on pollution from the mill. He headed out one day last winter for more samples, and he never came back. There was a big search done of the area, but nothing found. Local guy, so he supposedly knew the bush. Case is still open, but no new ideas have popped up. JB will be talking to you about it, I'm sure, once you settle in it. She's convinced the mill is somehow involved. Here we are, the main turnoff. The harsh glare of the street lights revealed a Metro grocery, a Petro-Canada station, a small motel, and a restaurant, and 5 or 6 small houses. The highway continued on into the dark, and a smaller side road led off to the right, presumably to the town. Reese pulled over across from the turnout. The town, the lake, everything's down there. The gas station here has movie rentals, and our mayor owns the restaurant. Running the town isn't a full-time job, and it's a handy place for him to do his wheeling and dealing with his buddies. And you can get takeout pizza from there with free delivery, too. Just ask someone at the restaurant to your party. The Metro store is fairly new. They get some business from the town, as well as a lot of tourist traffic from the park and local cottages. The motel was a long row of units, a few with lights on, but mostly dark and snowed in. At the end of the row was a combination restaurant and bar. The parking lot in front was filled with ATVs and snowmobiles, and closer to the road was a row of flashy SUVs and muscle cars. Reese nodded at the off-road vehicles. The biggest problems up here are not on the roads. People get hammered in the bar, jump on one of their toys, and then drive off into the bush. Some end up flipping over or getting lost, running out of gas, or worse, they charge across the highway right in front of one of the logging trucks. Reese started up the truck again and headed down into the town. As the road dipped downhill, Dave's home for the year came into view, framed between the walls of the rock cut. There was a scattering of house lights and plumes of smoke rising straight up from chimneys into the cold air. The empty main street continued on straight down to the lake, where a full moon reflected off the water. Dave had an urge to whistle, suddenly feeling like Ichabod Crane heading into the unknown. "So this JB runs the hotel?" said Dave. "Yep," said Reese. "She's a real ball of energy. A little outspoken at times, but gets along well with most people. She's looking forward to meeting the new guy, like most of the town." Well, Dave didn't relish the thought of having to pretend to socialize with people whose perception of police work came from television. Maybe he could use his fade and avoid some of the chit-chat. The town looked quiet, tidy, woodsy. Unlike those at Toronto, most of the trees here were tall and thin, poking above the deep snow. There are a few side streets lined with high snowbanks, but most of the town was clustered along the main street. He listened half asleep as his tour continued in the fading light. Another gas station, building supply that sprawled over a whole block, a scattering of small shops and houses, 2 churches, a typical small town. He'd been posted to a couple since graduating, counting the days in each one until he could leave for the next assignment. "It's pretty quiet now," said Reese, "but wait until summer. Norris tells me this place can keep the whole detachment hopping." "It looks fairly prosperous," said Dave. "Expensive cars, well-kept main streets." "There are rumors money was skimmed from the mill project into some local pockets," said Reese, "but nobody's really looked into it." Dave just nodded at that, resolving to add mill corruption to his list of things he was not going to worry about. He could wait until his replacement came. Reese pointed out the detachment office as they drove by. "Norris is still on duty. She'll be there another half hour at least, fighting with her paperwork. Not her favorite part of the job." "Mine neither," said Dave. The streets were empty, except for a black SUV parked in the next block. It was lost in the shadows until the top of it lit up like a Christmas tree and a siren whooped from it. "Damn it," said Reese as he stepped on the gas. Dave was suddenly wide awake, as was John. "Well, I thought you only had one SUV here." "We do," said Reese. "That one is the mill security, Tony Barretto. He's a bit of a problem for us. Big talker, buddies with the mayor, often gets carried away with trying to help in town. We keep warning him to stick to the mill property, but he doesn't seem to listen. They screeched to a stop by the two people in front of the mill vehicle. One was obviously the security guard, big and burly, decked out in a ball cap, black uniform, Kevlar vest, and police issue boots with a selection of gadgets and cases dangling from his belt. The other was a tall but thin youth in a denim jacket, torn jeans, and scuffed sneakers. The guard was holding the youth by the collar with one hand, a bike with the other. "Oh, looks like he's after JB's brother again," said Reese. He poked his head out of the window and shouted, "Let go of the kid." Bretto watched as Reese and some new guy got out of the SUV. Too bad they showed up before he could put a real scare into this punk. Hey, Reese, about time. Good thing for you I was here. I managed to catch another one for you." Reese walked closer. "Bretto, let him go, now." Tony gave Junior another shake, then let go of his collar. "He was sneaking around, probably heading off to score some drugs or something. I think we should frisk him." The stranger stepped forward and stared at Tony. "We, as in you and I, won't do anything of the kind." Tony puffed out his chest. "Who the hell are you, another wet behind-the-ears recruit?" He tried to hold the stranger's glare, but finally had to look away. "I'm Corporal David Brown, RCMP, new detachment commander of the Kirk's Landing office. First, who are you? Second, why did you assault this youth?" "New commander? This guy could be a problem. He might not be as easy to push around as Reese and Norris." "Oh, well, this kid is part of a gang of troublemakers, and his people are always—" "Pay attention," said Dave. "First, who are you?" Tony adjusted his belt. "I'm Tony Barretto, chief of security at the mill." Dave nodded. "Mr. Barretto, now, getting back to my jurisdiction, what exactly are you doing here?" His jurisdiction? This guy had some learning to do. This was a mill town. Best not to push too hard, though. "Okay, sorry, Dave. I know your people have been short-staffed lately, so I've just been trying to help out wherever I can. It's sort of a partnership. I saw this kid trying to steal a bike." "Hey, it's my bike," said Junior. "And you would be?" asked Dave. "Junior Budabo, I live on the reserve and was just heading home on my bike, the one with my social insurance number on it right here, when this goon jumped me, for the third time this week." "Goon?" Tony was about to erupt again when the new cop held up a hand. "Junior, wait with the constable for a minute, would you? Mr. Barretto, step over here with me, please." "Tony," said Dave, "I'm sure you mean well, but I think now that I'm on board, we can manage just fine. As for your gang concerns, my gang experience included knives and guns and cocaine and heroin, and somehow I think those are not issues in your quiet little town." This was sounding like a brush-off. "There's a lot of concerned people here that think otherwise," said Bretto. "Gangs, I mean, not the drugs. No, we're clean here." And he'd make sure it kept looking like that. "It's these kids. They just think they can run wild, whooping it up, leaving their gang tags all over the town." "I'm sure I'll hear everyone's concerns in the next few days," said Dave, "but we can talk later about this." Tony was confident that once the mayor had a talk with this new guy, he'd take his proper place in their town. "Sure, no problem." "We don't want any confusion in the eyes of the townspeople," said Dave, "as that could waste valuable minutes in an emergency. I'll let you get back to your own duties in the mill now, so that I can have a talk with Junior. I'll let you know if I need any more information, or if he wants to pursue any assault charges." That startled Tony, but he decided the cop was just bluffing. With one more glare at Junior, he turned back to his own SUV. He'd better call the mayor and the mill manager to warn them about the new guy. So that's the end of the first few chapters of Kirk's Landing. What do you think? Dave still has to check in and meet Norris, some of the other key people in town, and settle in, decide how he's going to spend a quiet year. And of course, there'll still be murder and romance, his First Nations friends, good and evil spirits. Would you like to learn more about him? Well, there's more info on my novels and where to buy him via my site, mikeyoung.ca. Stay tuned for more podcasts, either my own stories on Fridays or some of the classics on Tuesdays. If you subscribe to my newsletter, you'll get the next installment as soon as it's ready. If you enjoy this reading or have other stories you'd like to hear, leave me a comment. And do check out my other posts on my Substack at ravensview.substack.com. Ta-ta for now.